That's right, I crashed my brand new, beautiful, less than 100 miles ridden InMotion V11. And when people ask me whether or not the wheel survived and if it's still turned on, my answer is, does this look like it's still running? This just happened last weekend, so we're going to talk about it this week while it's fresh on my mind. This week, how I destroyed my InMotion V11, what happened and why I think it happened, and what I learned about riding an EUC as well as the V11 itself. Are you ready for the gruesome detail? Roll the intro. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified of new videos, and stay to the end for a preview of what's coming up next. I have been loving my time with the V11. It's a smooth, surprisingly powerful yet well-mannered, and likely the best appointed wheel on the market. It is neither the fastest nor have the best suspension system, but yet there is that indescribable sense of quality that you would get from a high-end premium product that made it not just enjoyable to ride, but to live with. Now, I haven't ridden it as much as I like with the arrival of the Hsiang S18, but now that I'm done with the initial impression on that wheel, I figure it's time for me to get back on the V11 so I can start testing it for my reviews. It does take a bit of riding to acclimate to the V11 and its higher pedal position, but after spending some time Friday morning riding around downtown picking up groceries, I felt sufficiently comfortable on it, so I headed towards Queens to my parents. I was on 1st Avenue heading uptown, and as customary for anyone who finds himself on a suspension-equipped electric unicycle, I was hitting as many potholes as I can. Coming up to the 12th Street intersection, there was a giant sinkhole which I did avoid. Wouldn't want to take a chance with my shiny new V11. I did aim for a smaller manhole cover just past the intersection. The suspension compressed and popped me up somehow slightly higher than expected, and when my weight came back down, the wheel felt abnormal and softened, and I wasn't able to maintain balance on it. All I felt with my feet was the back edge of the pedal before falling backward to land on my back, and the last thing I saw was the V11 rolling off into the distance before veering left and smashing itself into the back end of a parked truck on the shoulder. So this was the manhole cover I hit just before I lost control of the wheel. I went skidding down the street about a third of the way before landing, and the V11 kept on going for another 40 to 50 feet and hit a mail truck that was parked near the intersection on the left-hand side. The wheel crunched against the truck at about the same time as I landed, so I didn't actually see the impact, but I did hear the crunch. And by the time I got up and collected myself, the wheel was already in pieces and scattered across the road. So I had to get up, drag it off the street, and also collect all the pieces. So what happened? I wish I had a camera rolling, but I didn't, so we'll have to speculate based on what I remember and the damage the V11 sustained. And I smashed her up really good. You can tell that the upper handle took a huge impact, and that in turn shattered the entire upper saddle assembly. The aluminum slider that was acting as the primary point of attachment for the pedal hanger is still intact and hasn't been warped by all the force exerted on it. But much of the force from the upper assembly was transferred to and bent the upper nozzles on the piston shocks on both sides, which by the way is where I actually think the weight of the rider is actually transferred to the shock itself. The headlight took a huge hit on the side with enough force to break the mounting tabs on the right sides and push the whole housing slightly to the left. I haven't opened it up yet to see if the internal is intact, but the wheel no longer turned on. Finally, there was a huge rip on the tire on the right hand side, as well as a big crack on the rear right cover. I opened it up to make sure that sensitive battery packs weren't impacted, and thankfully InMotion also left some cushioning space between the edge of the outer enclosure and the battery pack, as well as put the battery pack in their own separate casing to further protect them. A really good idea, since any sort of puncturing to the packs themselves could potentially lead to a battery fire. Based on these damages as well as what I recall, I'm going to give you 3 different scenarios on what I think may have caused the crash. And I'll give you reason for and against each, and then I'll let you make up your own mind as to what you think actually happened and caused my crash. And of course, what I learned about the V11 as a result of all of this stuff. There being a single instance of production run V11 cutting out randomly. The cause of it is still under investigation by InMotion, so unfortunately, we don't really know why nor what signs to even look for. However, it did happen during the first 5 miles of that particular copy of V11. And for my own V11, I have ridden it for at least 50 miles without encountering any issues, nor have I felt any signs that would make me doubt the reliability of the wheel itself. I think this is the least likely scenario, since I do remember seeing the wheel continue to stay upright as it rode towards the truck. And based on past experience, when the wheel do cut out, what it will start to do immediately is that the entire case would rotate forward as it starts to follow the momentum of the spinning wheel itself, and the entire wheel will start to tumble and skip down the road, and there would have been more damage to the front of the headlight assembly if that had been the case. Scenario 2. I suck as a rider. This honestly was the first thought that went through my mind as I suddenly find myself in midair, about to have a lovely day with Mr. Asphalt. And yes, it is still a possibility, and my only defense is that I have been riding the wheel enough and have hit worse surfaces than the dip that caught me, and also since I didn't have my camera selfie sticks, I was better balanced, more aware, and able to deal with unpredictable conditions. It is certainly still a possibility, however, given how well the suspension system on the V11 works, as well as the fact that it is a relatively flat and smooth section of the pavement, it would certainly be a freakish coincidence for me to somehow lose my sense of balance for no apparent reason on a flat section of the road. Scenario 3. The ripped tire. I actually never seen a tire rip this badly, not even on a motorcycle crash, and it certainly would have caused the crash if this had occurred mid-ride. For something to be able to rip the tire that badly, it would need to be something not just sharp and thick, but also anchored to the actual pavement itself, so that it will really grab and rip your tire. Sometimes the manhole cover has a rim that's not perfectly formed and comes up and potentially could rip your tire, but that particular one doesn't seem to have any of those sharp edges, so I don't think it's that either. And after the crash, I actually walk up and down the road just to check to see if there's any debris that could have done that kind of damage to my tire. But again, I didn't see anything. It basically looked like this. I had originally thought that the rip in the tire lines up with the damage in the side case and that they came from the same impact. However, I have since starting to think that these two aren't actually related, since anything with enough force to actually do this much damage to the tire would have been even worse on the plastic case. I have heard that a rip like this can also be caused by tire defect. Scary thought, since there are little you can do to help mitigate risk, especially since we're on a unicycle with just a single wheel and no backup. The only consolation are that blowout caused by tire defect are exceedingly rare. I personally have never heard of any instance of it happening to anyone with an electric unicycle, and since the Galway Nikola also used this very same tire, there's certainly very many of them being used on a daily basis, and again, I have never heard of this affecting anyone else before. So what did we learn from all of this? First of all, gear up. You never know. You're riding a unicycle and there's zero backup. Doesn't matter how skilled you are, even if you're riding the latest suspension equipped wheel, things can still go wrong. Luckily, I landed on my back with a backpack full of groceries to act as additional cushion. So 2 packs of tofu and 3 packs of salted egg took most of the impact. And apparently they were made out of tougher stuff than I am, since all the food survived the crash, while me on the other hand, I'm still sore even after 3 days. As to the V11, unfortunately, I found the one downside of having a suspension system. They're going to have a harder time surviving a high-speed, hard crash than a traditional non-suspension electric unicycle. I have had multiple crashes at the same or even greater speed on the Z10, and other than bending the trolley handle assembly, it worked just fine without any issues.
That is likely not going to be the case for any suspension wheel given their increasing complexity over a traditional electric unicycle. There are more bits that could potentially get broken in a crash. They're also taller and heavier, which means that there's more momentum for them to go tumbling down the road and for the taller bits to get smashed up, again like the saddle assembly on my InMotion V11.
Their longer shape also means that they won't roll like a rounder wheel like the InMotion V10 or the Gotway Nikola tends to do in a crash, which is a decent way to dissipate energy. I do have to say that the way InMotion designed the V11 by keeping most of the components inside of a single assembly and only float the pedal and the saddle means that they also keep most of the damage away from those critical components. The control board housing seems well protected and did not take a single scratch since it's nested between the tail light and the headlight enclosure, and although the headlight enclosure took a direct hit, I'm hoping that since it is pretty solidly reinforced that nothing inside was damaged. I'll probably have to do a more thorough disassembling to check to see what is going on inside and also why this wheel wouldn't turn on at all. And despite the complexity of the wheel itself, I actually did not find it too difficult to take this wheel apart. The only thing to keep in mind is that since they utilize very many different kind of screws, you need to find some way to keep track of what goes where when you need to put it back together. I'm working with InMotion and hoping that with their help I'll be able to repair the wheel and bring it back into working order, but for now, sorry, but I have to keep you guys waiting just a bit longer for my review of the V11 as well as comparison to the S18. And it makes me sad to see it like this, as I really enjoy my brief time riding the V11. It takes a bit of time to sync up with the wheel given its taller pedal height and different balances, but once I did, it was a beautiful, beautiful wheel to ride and I really miss it. All I can do now is to wait and hope that I'll be able to get it running before too long. Oh man, look at the time. I somehow managed to waste another 10 minutes of your life, but I hope you enjoyed it. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and check out the link to my Patreon page if you'd like to support my work. And as much as we all love electric unicycle, the only way for us to get better wheels is to grow as a community. So tell your friend and teach them how to ride and get them hooked. And you thought all us New Yorker did was street riding. Next episode, we review the Hsiang S18.